Hello, hello everybody. It's Tasha here for those who haven't listened to my talk before. I am going to do a talk today on fashion, something that I hope you'll find interesting. I mean, there's so many things to talk about when it comes to fashion. Hello, thanks for joining. Now, I'm not super into fashion. You might be able to tell. I'm just wearing casual clothes because because the schools at the moment, just to let you know, are on half term in England, which means they get a week off. So I get a week off as well, which is very nice. So yeah, fashion is a funny thing because when we think of fashion, we think of clothes, maybe glasses, handbags, accessories, but there's so many interesting things to talk and think about, and fashion really is the influence of culture and of music and of the arts, and yeah, so that's what we're gonna talk about today. I'll just have a sip of water. Oh, I'm quite thirsty today. What else has been going on? Yeah, so I'm off work. England, let me tell you about the weather to start with. It's been horrible. We've had 2 storms. We had one storm called Storm Ciara and another storm this week called Storm Dennis. And there's been floods, so lots of water flooding everywhere. Really strong winds. I think in Scotland they had 90-mile-per-hour winds, which is really strong. And it's been horrible. It's been really grey. In fact, let me show you out the window now so you can get an idea of what it looks like. So this is my house and this is just outside. Classic grey skies. You can see the other houses on my street. Our recycling bin. In England you get a recycling bin and a rubbish bin. And I'm quite excited because my front garden, this property is very new to me, somewhere I rent. And I can see there's some bulbs and things popping up, so I'm hoping I might get some flowers in my front garden, so that's quite exciting. Right, well, let's get started. As always, any questions, please let me know. It can be about anything. And I'm just going to flip the camera around here so you can see. This is what we're going to be talking about, fashion. English fashion through the ages. There's a picture of a model there on a catwalk. So, let's get started. So to start, let's just look at some synonyms or some words relating to fashion. So a fad, you'll hear that word, that's a really great English word. A fad is something that's fashionable only for a certain amount of time. So, for example, there was a time when I was young when everyone had watches that they wore as rings, so little watches that tell the time, and kids would wear them as rings, and that was a fad. It was something that was around for a couple of months and then never happened again. So when you hear the word fad, it's a short-term fashion thing. Form, look, mode, model, pattern, shape, thing, tone, trend. So in England, if something's on trend, it's in fashion, it's trendy. Appearance, bandwagon. This is an interesting word, bandwagon. So, for example, if lots of people started wearing purple lipstick and it became fashionable, you could say that, oh, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon, I'm also going to have purple lipstick. So something like bandwagon, it just means that you're jumping into the trend. And hello for those who are joining. Chic, so this word chic, so something fashionable, chic. Configuration, convention, craze. So you could say a fashion craze. Hello, thank you for joining. Cry, cultism, cultus, custom, cut, figure, furor, latest, line, make, mould, rage, usage, and Vogue. You may have heard of Vogue magazine, very famous. We could actually say the Vogue of the day. It's a bit of a dated saying, but you could say something's in vogue. So at the moment, I think something that's fashionable is dresses with patterns on them, or like floral dresses, so flowery dresses. And you could say flowery dresses are in vogue, meaning flowery dresses are in fashion. So some really great words there. And yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about fashion through the ages. So I'm not going to talk about this too much, but I do think it's worth going back to, 1050, medieval times, when men and women, obviously fashion wasn't a thing really, it was more practical clothing. However, there still would have been things that were popular for the day. So here's a sort of just an artistic impression of what clothes would have looked like. Men, we would call this a tunic, so something that men would wear, and leggings or tights with boots. And I've mainly just got some pictures here. So for the more wealthy, obviously the quality of the clothes would have been much nicer. I just think, isn't this fantastic? Imagine wearing that just on a casual evening. The Tudors, you may have heard of King Henry VIII. I just thought this was a fantastic image because it shows how flamboyant or extravagant the fashion was, especially if you were a monarch. So if you were in royalty, you can imagine the jewellery, the expense of it, and how heavy it might have been. Oh, just brief pause there. This is Giles. I'm sure you guys know. Just say hello. Hello, Giles. Oh, can you hear him purring? Yeah, so let's have a look at a lady during sort of the Tudor period. They would have worn a headdress, a ruff around the neck, a bodice and a skirt. Now the bodice, you may have heard of a corset, and a corset, oh, he's interrupting. Giles just wants all of the attention. He's so handsome. So, back in the day when ladies would have worn corsets, which would have meant they were tied at the back. So this lady would have had someone dress her, and the corsets, to accentuate the waist or to make the waist appear even smaller, they literally moved where women's organs were. It was apparently incredibly painful to wear a corset, and women would have been fainting and really struggling with their health whilst wearing these really small, really breathing in to wear these corsets. In fact, it's an interesting fashion. You may have heard of it. I have some students that wear things called waist trainers, and it's similar to a corset. So it's the idea that you wear something that will make your waist even smaller, which I think is ridiculous. You have the body you have, enjoy it. So obviously, in medieval times, you know, a tiny waist was a very attractive quality. So the women would have worn these very tight corsets with big underskirts, which, you know, to show their fertility, I guess. Women with big hips is very fertile. And this, I just thought was a beautiful image. This is to depict Queen Elizabeth I, and she reigned from 1533 to 1603. And again, she would have had to wear a corset. These skirts were massive. They would have had lots and lots of layers. There would have been all sorts of materials. The headdresses would have been jewels and feathers, and all sorts of things. Can you imagine how heavy that would have been to wear? It would be very uncomfortable. And also it was very fashionable to be pale, to have pale skin to show that you're not working. And I think it's interesting to note this kind of thing, because pale skin would be seen, oh, you're not working in the fields, you're not a farmer, you've got money, you're not tanned. And now in the 21st century, you know, everyone wants a tan. You know, you almost look healthier when you've got some colour in your cheeks. I should know because I'm very pale, and you will see in summer I will look exactly the same. I will have no tan, unfortunately. So I just wanted to touch on these eras a little bit, and thank you for those who join in. Please ask if you have any questions. The Victorian era from 1837 to 1901. So fashion, obviously it changes so much, and it's in such a short time that these outfits change. So as we go into the 19th century, I found this fantastic picture, again showing women probably wearing a corset, big billowing dresses, and I just thought these images were so beautiful to have real photographs. I wonder what these ladies did for a living, if they were just ladies at home, probably weren't working. So what I really was excited to talk about though is the 1920s. So this was a really liberating time for women, and for men as well. And I love the fashion of the 20s. For those of you who like myself, I love a fancy dress party or a costume party. And hello, thank you for joining. You know, flapper dresses, and that 20s style is a very classic era. And I've got some fantastic pictures showing ladies in the flapper dresses. You know what? I'm not sure what these hats are called. Does anyone know? I can't remember the name of them, the style of them. But absolutely, it was sort of as women were having more freedom, you know, after the First World War. The skirt, the hemline, so let's call this the hemline, so where the line was lower. Originally the hemline would have been up at the waist to accentuate the waist, like the previous dresses we saw, but during the 20s the hemline got lower, and it was quite a daring look to have short hair. Before the 20s, women didn't really have short hair. It was seen as quite a boyish look. So to me, I love this image because it's sort of women, you know, really getting their freedom, choosing how they wanted to look, not being told how they should look, but actually choosing themselves how they wanted to look. And it was in an age of jazz and music, so it is important to remember that music really influenced the time, influenced fashion. I mean, we'll talk about it a bit later as well, but if you think about what pop stars are wearing today and how that feeds down into what younger people wear, fashion is culture. It really is. It tells you what the times are like. And I've got some picture of some men in the 20s as well, looking very dapper, and I wonder what they're up to. So in the 1920s, after centuries of wearing constricting corsets to achieve an hourglass figure is literally like an hourglass, you know, something that you would turn like a sand timer, if you know what I mean, where you turn it and it would have sand in and it would be for a set amount of time. So a classic hourglass figure. And it says here, women started to wear clothes that produced a boyish, so a male, a more masculine silhouette. The flappers who wore these dresses were telling the world that they were sick of wearing constricting clothing and they wanted to be free. Isn't that fantastic? So for me, you know, as I was doing some research, this was like the beginning of the revolution for women. You know, the suffragette movements were starting. There were male activists, you know, protesting for women's rights. There were women protesting for their rights. And to just be able to wear something comfortable, not a tight corset, that would have just been fabulous and so freeing. So, such a great style. So, I'm just going to read you something that I found that I thought was quite interesting. So, the 1920s to the 1930s, I'm just going to read this aloud and then we can talk through some of the language here. And thank you for listening, guys. I hope this is interesting. So, the light-hearted, forward-looking attitude and fashion of the late 1920s lingered through most of 1930, but by the end of that year, the effects of the Great Depression began to affect the public, and a more conservative approach to fashion displaced that of the 1920s. For women, skirts became longer, and the waistline was returned to its normal position. Other aspects of fashion from the 1920s took longer to phase out. Oh, here we go. Those hats I was talking about. Cloche hats. C-L-O-C-H-E. Cloche. Cloche hats. We'll go back to a picture. Cloche hats remained popular until about 1933, while short hair remained popular for many women until late in the 1930s and even in the early 1940s. The Great Depression took its toll on the 1930s women's wear due to World War II, which dates from 1939 to 1945. This greatly affected the fashion of how women dressed during the 1940s era. According to Scrimpton, committed to ensuring the fair distribution of scarce but essential resources, namely food, clothing and furniture, the government introduced a comprehensive rationing scheme based on allocation of coupons, a system deriving, ironically, from the German rationing plan devised in November 1930. So, that was an awful lot of information. Let's break some of that down. So, the Great Depression, which was obviously in America, when there wasn't much work, it was after the First World War, there was a lot of poverty and hunger. So that is interesting, that from the 20s, when women were having more freedom, it actually sort of almost went backwards a little bit and it became more traditional again, and women were wearing longer skirts and the hemline was going back to the waist. So because of the war, clothes were rationed, just like food was. So my grandma, in the Second World War, when she was a little girl, she remembers they had, in England, they were given ration cards. And rationing is when the government meant that food, because it was scarce, there wasn't a lot of food, you could go to your shop and you would get a ration for your family. So you might get a bag of flour, some milk and some butter, but it would only be a small amount, and each family had to, you know, live with what they were rationed with, what they were given. And yeah, so well, I've lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so rationing. For example, my grandma can remember having powdered eggs. So not eggs that you'd crack, but eggs like the powder. And you know, obviously there wasn't a lot of sweets or treats or chocolate or anything like that. So even clothes would have been, you know, they would have been expensive, so they would have been rationed. So, you know, that would have really changed how we thought of things. And also clothes, you know, during the war for women and for men, it would have been very practical. So clothes that were practical, they had a purpose. So as we move on, let's flip my camera back round. This, I believe this picture's in the 1930s or 1940s, it might be by then. So can you see long skirts were back, hemlines or belts at the waist. I love this photo of these men. Look how young this kid is, but he looks very smart. You could say that these men maybe look dapper, they look smart. They're wearing suits and ties, and this would have been an everyday dress in England, suits and ties. In fact, you can see that lady in the background, very traditional skirt, blazer. And this was also a fabulous picture. Remember these cloche hats, which I absolutely love. I've got a hat very similar to that actually now. So yeah, I thought these are some great pictures. So during the 40s and 50s, during, you know, the end of the war, fashion and the movement for women's rights really took off. So it really began to change. I love these dresses, aren't they beautiful? I wonder where these women were, what they were doing. So you can see the material would have been, this is like a tweed, stiff, smart jackets, smart clothes. Notice their hair would have been permed and curly. The men, these are, we call these trench coats, which, you know, come in. I think that's another thing to note, is these kind of styles in and out of fashion, meaning that fashion is always changing, and a lot of these styles get regurgitated or reused, and, you know, will come back into fashion again at some point. I love these hats as well, they're fabulous. Now, this is what I'm most excited to talk about, is from the 60s onward, where we've got some real photographs. And, you know, the 1960s in England really was a time of freedom and clothing revolution. And do I prefer skirts or trousers? Personally, I prefer skirts, just because I look better in a skirt than I do in a pair of trousers. So yeah, thank you, good question. I love this look of the 60s. The skirts got very, very short. The makeup was much heavier. Women wear a lot of eyeliner. And the 60s were an age of fashion innovation for women. Audrey Hepburn, you may have heard of her, a very famous actress. She really influenced the style of the 60s. And again, this was the culture of the day, freedom after the war. And, you know, the 1950s housewife, that was becoming a thing of the past. Women were beginning to work. There was obviously freedom, sexual revolution with the pill being invented. So the 60s was an amazing time for fashion. And before I go to this picture, I'm just going to quickly go to the Beatles. I'm sure you guys must know the Beatles. Maybe give me a thumbs up if you know the Beatles, any Beatles songs. So the Beatles were a huge influence on fashion in the 60s. And it started this movement. We would call these people the mods, which is just a shortened word for basically meaning modern people, the mods. And again, this is another example of music and fashion and culture all intertwining together. So the freedom of women, the music of the Beatles, and yeah, people, and I just look at their hairstyles. I mean, it's fantastic. Look how happy that guy is. Looks like he's having the time of his life. This guy giving this lady a look. And yeah, I don't know where that picture was taken. So again, short skirts, little boots. The 60s was an amazing time for fashion. Look at that. That would have been on the London Underground. Can you see the train in the background? Oh, good question. Are you a shopaholic? No, I am very good at not spending money on clothes. But my sister, she is a shopaholic. She buys new clothes at least once a week, all the time. I buy new clothes, I don't know, not as often as I would like, very rarely. A lot of the clothes I have are gifts, like this jumper, which is just a casual jumper, was from my grandma. These earrings were from my friend Sam. And yeah, so I don't spend much money on clothes, but you know, I spend money on more like going out, doing other things. So in the 60s, let me show you a picture of a man which I thought was very suave, so very stylish and suave, very cool, casual. Oh, that's a good question. Can I knit or sew? No, I can't, unfortunately. My grandma can, and I have friends who can, but no, I can't. Can you? And are you a shopaholic? And do you like to make your own clothes? I think it's fantastic if you can make your own clothes. I think that's brilliant. So this is like a 60s man. We would call this a roll neck jumper, or a turtleneck jumper, a blazer, jeans. And it says here, I've got popular 1960s styles for men were suede lace-up Oxfords, monk strap shoes, penny loafers, Chelsea boots, western boots, chucker boots, retro sneakers, leather sandals. Most men's dress shoes and boots had a high shine to go with the plastic age. So I'm just going to leave those here for a second. If you want to look up Chelsea boots, penny loafers, do a bit of research, you can see all these different styles. Chelsea boots, I don't know where that comes from. Probably there is a place called Chelsea in England, and it's a very wealthy part of, I think it's part of London. And I've got a pair of Chelsea boots. They're just a particular style. And, oh, am I going to wear a wedding dress? I absolutely am. When I get married, I'm going to talk about wedding dresses in a little bit. So thank you for that question. Yes, I cannot wait to wear a wedding dress. And I'm going to wear something quite traditional, I think. White and lacy. Yeah, thank you. Good question. So this is still the 60s. It was sort of a return to youth. Shocking colours, shorter hemlines. So this is the hemline. Pop art and the hippie movement. So during the 60s and 70s, there was a bit of a revolution. culturally, and this obviously affected the fashion. I'm sure most of you know Audrey Hepburn. She was very influential on style, very classy, beautiful outfit, lots of diamonds and jewels. Isn't she gorgeous? I just love that picture. And she influenced, or helped influence, this hairstyle, which I think is quite ridiculous, and we call this the beehive. So if you talk about someone in the 60s, you could ask, did they have a beehive? And it's just the beehive is this huge head of hair. What a look! My goodness. I wonder if that will come back in fashion. For those of you, you might know the singer Amy Winehouse, and she had a big beehive. So that was a very big fashion statement in the 60s. And as we move on to the 60s and the 70s, long hair for men became back in fashion. Beards, moustaches, pattern clothes, leather, suede, and what I really want to talk about, flare trousers. So, flares. These were huge. In the 70s in England, everyone had a pair of flares. Flares are trousers that they're tight at the top and they go out at the bottom, like in a triangle. I love this picture. Isn't that fantastic? So big hair, small waists, big flare trousers. Although I don't think you would have got women walking down the street in London quite so bold, but who knows, maybe. So here we go, flares. I've actually got a pair of flares and I love them, even though they're not in fashion now. So again, this was just a movement in the 70s and 80s. Someone once said to me, going out in London is like going to a fashion show, and it really is. I mean, you go to London and you can see any style from any age, but people are very, fashion is really huge in England. I should talk about how cheap it is, because there's a bit of a thing at the moment called fast fashion, and by fast fashion I mean people buy new clothes every week and only wearing it once because it's so cheap. So you could go, and there's a shop called Primark, which is, very famous in England. If you come to England, you have to go to Primark. It is amazing, but it's incredibly cheap. So you could buy a dress in Primark, say for £5, and it wouldn't last long. The quality isn't good, but it's cheap. So if you were going on a night out and you wanted a new outfit, so something completely new to wear, you could go to Primark, the shop, and get very cheap clothes. This is a bit of a problem because it's very wasteful. So people, they wear these clothes once and then they either throw them in the bin or maybe give them to charity shops. But it means that, without going into it too much, it means that these clothes are very cheaply made, normally in factories. A lot of our stuff gets made in China or Indonesia or India, and the working conditions of the people who make these clothes is terrible. So there is a problem in England. Fashion is so important that people will buy something and only wear it once, which is very wasteful. So that's something to think about anyway. That's partly why I don't like to buy clothes too much, although, there's nothing wrong with getting a new outfit, of course. You may, again, another band that I'm hoping you'll have heard of, ABBA. very, very famous. Are they Swedish? I think they're Swedish. I mean, look at these flares and big platform wedges, knee-high leather boots, absolutely outrageous. So these clothes in the 70s, ABBA, the band, they would have, again, really influenced what people would have worn. As we move on, you might notice some people that you recognise in this image, particularly in the forefront, we've got Madonna. So fashion, here we go. We're going to talk about the 80s, the 1980s. Now, in my opinion, the 1980s was the worst year for fashion. It was, for me, not a good look. You know, it was big shoulder pads, like geometric patterns, and, you know, sort of old-fashioned hair. I think the 1980s, in my personal opinion, you know, you might love it and that's fine, was a terrible time for fashion. So big shoulder pads, geometric shapes, so like triangles and all sorts. That's obviously Princess Diana there, looking lovely. Oh, good question. Do I like high heels? I do love high heels. Unfortunately, high heels do not love me. I love the look of high heels, but I'm not very good at walking in them. In fact, I can show you some amazing high heels I've got maybe at the end if we've got time. So, thank you for these questions, by the way. Love them. Keep them coming. So, this is a very 80s look. Lots of clothes thrown together. Big, messy hair. Look at that image. And I've called this a bold look. Among women, large hairdos and puffed up styles typified the decade. The short, tight spandex miniskirts were a popular fashion item for young women. A jelly shoe, and young women wearing something called spaghetti strap dresses. So spaghetti strap dresses were thin strap dresses. So this would have been a look for young people in the 80s going out. You know, not my favourite look, not gonna lie. Lots of hair accessories like bows in the hair. So this would have been young girls going out in the 80s, out in London, probably for a dance and a few drinks. Now during the 70s and the 80s, probably, yeah, I mean, around the 70s, you may have heard of a band called Nirvana. Oh, no, that was the 90s. No, I'm getting ahead. Slow down. I'm getting ahead of myself. The 70s, I want to talk about punks. So, a punk would be someone who likes rock and roll music, maybe anti-government, like quite, you know, a rebel maybe, and would have dressed very cheaply, would have generally had, you know, the women might have had short hair, lots of eyeliner, and it's sort of associated with rock and roll music, and drugs, and a very unique time, the 70s. This hairstyle is called a mohawk or a Mohican. So these guys with brightly coloured Mohicans. And I've got here that the punk rock subculture began in the United States in the early 1970s as both a continuation and a reaction to the 1960s countercultural movements. Although punk music was largely an American invention, punk style and attitude was very much a product of British youth culture. So this was my auntie, in fact. She was a punk, and she would wear a bin bag, you know, like a bag that you'd put your rubbish in, a bin bag, maybe a safety pin through her ear. Very cool. So, you know, very rock and roll. you would have seen lots of punks in the 70s. Leather jackets, tartan, so like Scottish tartan trousers, Doc Martin boots, incredibly famous Doc Martens, big thick leather boots. I have a pair of Doc Martin boots myself, actually. They're very comfortable. So yeah, the punks. Now, what I wanted to talk about next was the 90s. A great year for fashion, and you may have heard of this lady, Kate Moss, who's still around now. And again, she had a very big influence on what was fashionable. She was probably only 16 years old, maybe, in this picture. And she really did influence London fashion. So during the 90s, it was a lot of showing your midriff with a belly button piercing. We call these tops tank tops or crop tops. Very straight hair. This is when straighteners first came about, hair straighteners. And obviously the Spice Girls in the 90s, they were huge, and they had a big influence on what was considered fashionable. Just to give you a rundown, if you don't know: Posh Spice, Baby Spice, Scary Spice, Ginger Spice, Sporty Spice. So don't know if you guys would know who the Spice Girls are, but they were a very huge 90s pop band. Also the TV series Friends. Who doesn't like Friends? Friends was amazing. And again, American, but would have influenced massively what English people would have worn. Also in the 90s, what I was talking about earlier, something called grunge. So bands like Nirvana, rock and roll bands, they influenced this kind of movement. Men would have had long hair. This is called a bandana. They come in and out of fashion. Big baggy jumpers, baggy trousers. I've got another picture here. Really baggy trousers, some with holes in them. Skater kids, people who like to skateboard, listen to music. Oh look, this guy's wearing a Nirvana t-shirt, just the band I was talking about. So yeah, that was the look of the 90s. Messy and yeah, good times. Now, as we move on, I don't know if you recognise this band. Oh god, I can't remember what they were called. Girls Aloud? Girls Aloud, yeah, that was it. We call these cargo pants. Again, still left over from the 90s. Belly button, belly ring, tank tops, straight hair. So we'd call the year 2000, we would call it the noughties. The year 2000, the noughties. And obviously, to show you pop stars, I mean, were people really wearing this in the streets? They would have been, or very similar. Christina Aguilera, she, again, a big influence on what people would have been wearing. Boy bands, don't know if you guys know Justin Timberlake. Shiny coats. This picture really makes me laugh. This is such a 90s look in England. If you went out into the streets, you would have seen lots of young men dressed like this. Quite different to the suits that we saw earlier on. Britney Spears, huge influence. This cap, very famous Britney cap. And something I wanted to talk about very briefly, size 0. So when I was probably about 17, 18 years old, it was very, very fashionable to be a size 0, which is to be very, very thin, very unhealthily thin. And I'm just going to show you this picture because this was considered very beautiful and fashionable, and actually I think it's quite a shocking image. I mean, you can see that this woman is clearly far too thin, not in any way healthy. I mean, you can see her ribs. and this was considered very fashionable. Now, I wanted to bring this up because it was a time for a lot of young women, or a lot of girls like myself, who, you know, the dresses were designed to only look good if you were very, very thin, and it was a really, you know, bad time for fashion, let's say. Whereas now, thankfully, oh sorry, can you hear that beeping? That's my washing machine. It beeps until it's done. I'll just go turn it off, otherwise it will keep beeping. See Giles on the way. Hello Giles, he's on his little cat stand. Don't know where my other cat is, probably out and about, running around like a nutter. Sorry about that. So yeah, size 0. So it was a really unhealthy time for fashion anyway. Thankfully now the fashion is to be fit and healthy and strong. So, you know, this lasted for a little bit of time. This is an image in 2010 I found. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, this would have been girls going to the prom, 2010. Very sweet image. I don't know who they are. I just thought this was quite nice. Alexa Chung. I don't know if you guys have heard of her, but to talk about modern fashion, she is a bit of a fashion icon. She was a model and a TV presenter, and she sort of brought casual fashion but smart clothes. Kate Middleton, obviously looking absolutely stunning. I love this dress. Isn't that gorgeous? So that's probably at the races, the horse races. And I just wanted to show you some pictures of her, because we would say in England she's very classy, meaning she's, you know, looks really nice and smart and elegant, very elegant. And nowadays, as I was saying, it's more attractive. Remember that really thin picture of the lady, size 0, which was the height of fashion? Now it's considered much healthier to be fit and healthy. And there's a really popular trend of something we call the active wear. So active wear is just sports clothes, basically. Now you could go out in London dressed like this, and that would be fashionable. People wouldn't mind that. Obviously not if you were going clubbing or to the pub maybe in the evening, but for daytime people will wear active wear in England now. And have I ever wanted to be a model? Oh no, I don't think I'm pretty enough to be a model, but thank you. I used to want to be an actress though. I was determined to be an actress one day, but alas, life changes, and it didn't happen, but there we go. So I'm glad you brought up wedding dresses earlier, because I found some pictures of the queens through the ages, and I thought, isn't this beautiful? So I'm just going to show you. You can think what you like about these images. So Princess Diana there. Again, big puffy sleeves. What a difference to Kate's dress now. I thought Kate's dress was absolutely stunning. This is the kind of dress I'd like to have for my wedding. Lacy sleeves, a veil, probably not a tiara, because I'm not a queen, but there we go. And obviously there's Meghan in a more simple but elegant gown. So it really has changed through time. But still, yeah, even weddings, fashion changes. I thought I'd end by showing you a few of my outfits over the years, just because why not? So this is my fiance, that's Tom. Isn't he cute? Look at him. Oh, thank you. And this was a dress I got for my friend's wedding and my auntie's wedding. I love that dress. This is me looking a bit sillier with my friend Sam. This is in Brighton on the coast. This was a few years ago. And so the fashion now, Sam's wearing sort of active wear, as I was saying, like trainers, leggings, big denim jacket, cropped top. And I'm wearing a more of a 70s style dress with trainers and a hat and sunglasses. So personally, I love wearing whatever. Oh, thank you for saying that. Thank you, that's very nice. I like wearing colourful clothes. So this is me outside a friend's house. This coat, I got this coat in Canada in a charity shop for $20, which was very cheap, and I was very happy with it, and I still have it now. And that's my friend Becca, looking lovely. So for me, I love wearing bright colours. I just like to wear fun things. I don't really follow fashion. I'm not really, I don't really follow the trends, but I like to look nice when I go out. This would have been sort of a casual look that you'll see in London, shorts, little t-shirt, obviously not normally a chicken in your arm. This was me maybe 5 years ago in Canada. And this is my sister who I wanted to talk about. This is when I had bright blue hair. What a look, eh? And she is a very fashionable lady, and this picture's a little bit blurry, but this was a few years ago. Tartan skirt, crop top, blonde but like beige hair, so brown to blonde beige, and I'm a bit more bright blue hair, little top, a bit more of a hippie maybe. Yeah, so that's my sister. Isn't she gorgeous? And we dress very differently, but it's great to have a sister that I can steal her clothes. And I think this is the last image I've got. This is me in the Grand Canyon, and this dress, this is called tie-dye. So tie-dye, when you get like a item of clothing and you dip it in all sorts of colours and it comes out with this effect. This is called a tie-dye effect. You can see my face, isn't that ridiculous? Thank you. She is a babe, my sister. Yeah, so I think that's... Oh, and this is me. Oh yeah, I wanted to show you this one. This is me dressing up 1920s style. So that flapper dress. I think I had a 1920s themed party. And yeah, that was my sister. Yeah. And yeah, so wearing that sort of flapper style dress, pearls, headband, cigarette holder. No cigarette though, obviously. And yeah, that's it. So, I hope you guys found that interesting. I think it's important to, fashion is important and it does change, but also it ebbs and flows. So it comes in and out of fashion. Things like these big round glasses. In the 90s, these would not have been fashionable. And now sort of an indie look, we would say indie glasses are sort of coming back into fashion. So fashion really does change so much. I've got some pictures just to finish up of London now and what people might wear if they're just going out for the day in London. Let me open this tab so you can see. So if you come to London, these are the kind of styles, things you can expect people to wear. White shirt is a classic with a little leather jacket. Jeans. Personally, I don't ever wear jeans. Honestly, I look terrible in jeans. But you will see everyone in London wears jeans. You can wear jeans to go out dancing, or you can wear jeans to go to work. If you're working in like a casual office, dress down Friday, you could wear jeans. Very popular. this lady just at an airport. We call these skinny jeans. When they're tight to your legs, they're called skinny jeans. Oh, they're nice shoes, aren't they? Woohoo! Oh, making me want to go shopping. This is Alexa Chung, who I was talking about earlier. Very fashionable, smart casual, we would say. So like a blazer and jeans, we would call it smart casual. Oh, you're crazy about jeans. You know what? I love jeans on other people. I just wish I looked good in them. Like Alexa Chung, these jeans, aren't they fab on her? She looks great. I love that look, smart casual look. Yeah, can you see that's a common sort of theme here? Jeans, a nice shirt, maybe a blazer, pair of heels maybe. Fabulous. Ooh, big billowy shirt. Love that. Cropped jeans. So if they're above the ankle, we'd call them cropped. And also it's very fashionable to have a hole in your jeans now, isn't it? God, I sound like an old lady, don't I? Casual, that's a nice look. Nice necklace. This would be, you know, that synonyms at the beginning. I would describe this outfit as chic. So she's got a leather jacket, a dress, some nice shoes, very chic look. Victoria Beckham, or Posh Spice, she's also known as. Again, a very fashionable lady. Yeah. So we've gone from, you know, fashion really has changed so much. We've gone from this style, you know, tunics, clothes that you would have worn out of necessity, you know, to keep warm, or whatever clothes were available, to, you know, having a really stylish time now. If you come to London, there is a museum. I was talking about it with one of my students the other day, called the Victoria and Albert Museum. It's also known as the V&A Museum. And this museum is fantastic. It's free, and also, it's free to go into, but you might have to pay for certain exhibits. And at the moment they've got an exhibition on kimonos, so Japanese exhibition. Quite often they'll have, like when I went, I saw clothes like from the Victorian era, so these beautiful gowns and jewellery. So I'd really recommend, if you're interested in fashion, going to the Victoria and Albert Museum. It's fantastic. And oh yes, the British Queen, she does have her own style. Let's just have a quick look at the Queen now, because she is a bit of a fashion icon. If we looked, let's just go to some images, because she has got a unique look. You will see the Queen, she'll always be wearing a hat, and normally a smart dress, gloves. Ah, there she is. Oh, I love that yellow. That's lovely. Yeah, very classy. Lovely look. So that'll do. That's my sort of talk done for today. If you have any other questions or anything, send them our way. And like I say, if there's anything else you want to talk about or learn about, please let me know. And thank you for listening, and thank you Mrs. Sashina for asking such good questions. I always appreciate it, and I hope you guys found that interesting. I really enjoyed just looking through all those pictures, and I will talk to you all next week. Until then, peace and love, and look after yourselves. Bye. Bye.